Hi, I recently created an illustrated storybook as a personalized gift for my wife. One of the things I wanted to do was create those illustrations using Midjourney because that would have helped me go like 10 or 100 times better quality of illustrations than what I can do on my own and really create something personalized and unique. Here I'm going to walk you through some of the learnings, the attempts I made, and the outputs that I generated using Midjourney. I'll talk about abstract images, the artistic style I used, the puppet method to create consistent character images, and also some of the standard tools that Midjourney has, like multi-prompts, varying regions, stop, or seed. So I'll talk about a bunch of those and some of the limitations I saw of Midjourney while trying these attempts. I will also not go through every single image, so I'll like more so scroll through. So first, the ones here are when I just uploaded an image of mine, kind of like a front headshot image of mine, and tried to ask Midjourney to create some images out of it. And those were sort of disappointing because I realized that our expectations are much higher when you give your own or like a person's image as is, because then you expect the output to be much closer to the input image. So because that wasn't happening, I realized that, but this is good if I were to say that, hey, I want a young Indian man with like facial hair and curly hair on the top and stuff. But this is not great if I say that I want the person to look like Harshal. I tried it in a few more variations. I'll show you those. The other images that you see here are of what my attempt of creating a magical medieval ice cream parlor where there are people sitting and having ice cream with some small leprechaun design on the wall. But the leprechaun word was too strong of an association for Midjourney, so it just filled up everything with that imagery. I was able to reduce it by giving it a really small weight in a prompt, multi-image prompt, and then I was able to get somewhat of like a stable image where there were kids and maybe adults having ice cream. When I said children, witch, and wizards, those two didn't go well compatibly. Like in this case, you'll find like white-haired small people, so it's not really children, given just how white their hair is and they have huge beards and all. Or if there's children, then they are not really eating ice cream, they're eating pumpkin juice or having, or like if it's adults, they are having coffee or tea. So it was really hard to get a mix of those things, and eventually I had to uh, like, drop some of my requirements, like lower my expectations while trying out multiple variations. I tried some vary region. For example, in this images, I chose one spot on the wall and said create leprechaun's wall art in this one. It didn't really create anything at all there, so I just skipped. I just skipped that part of my requirement. This image was one of the ones that I used eventually, was kids dressed as witches and wizards. And you can see that out of four, the leftmost definitely looks like a kid, but the second from the left looks like an old person with some white hair below. So not everything worked fine. Sometimes the images showed a medieval landscape, but from outdoors, not from inside of a parlor. And that is probably because when we talk about medieval or any style of architecture is usually from the outside, not from the inside. And because they were in an ice cream parlor, I wanted to show them having ice cream. So it created some good versions of ice cream, colorful ice creams. What I wanted was for it to look more magical. For example, sparks flying out of it, or a scoop of ice cream levitating, flying in the air. Those were not very feasible. When I tried to create this in the middle of a restaurant on a table, it instead created it at the side of a restaurant, or more like an artwork or a museum piece, because you can see it's at the very, very side. It also put too much focus on fruits versus also adding nuts and like maybe chocolate fudge pieces, cookie pieces in the ice cream sundae. So it was too fruity, and maybe that's how it was a few hundred years ago. Then we have images of a patronus or an animal shape, but made of energy. So I used the artistic medium cyanotype, and that gave me a very like blue, silver, ethereal feel to it, which I liked. I also used an image using Google image search as an input to this image, and that worked to stabilize it. Next, I wanted to create the floor of the restaurant with one single 3 or 4 leaf shamrock crust. And that didn't work well because either the shamrock had way too many leaves, or it was not in a restaurant, it was in the middle of a forest, or there were too many shamrocks, or the entire the entire floor became green. I tried a bunch of these variations and then left it. The other thing I wanted to do in the story was I wanted to emphasize the location, where things are happening, because that will help the reader imagine themselves in that location. So I wanted to show a magical wizarding alley or street in the daytime with rain, in the evening time, in the night time. And here are some attempts of showing it in the evening time. I also wanted to show some people like seeing at the rainy street while you're sitting inside the parlor, because the story was still inside the parlor, but it was raining outside. So how do I show that? But it instead added very modern looking people and cafes or restaurants, European style. So that didn't work well. I also tried to create, after some point, the protagonists move out of the ice cream parlor and they go to a magical wand shop. A wand is a piece of stick which has magical properties. And this wand shop, again, if I used a image I found on Fandom or Wiki, that worked well to stabilize it and create some desired output. At the end, it's still, you could always tell it's some kind of shop, but it was hard to tell it was of wands because it could just look like magical instruments or trinkets or books. Because you can see that it just looks like a lot of boxes. So that was the tricky part here. Now let's scroll up and let's see. I wanted to create a medieval wooden bench with a speck of silver paint on it. But either I got a very, very silver bench or just like some silver all throughout, but not very clear paints anywhere. I went with the like silver everywhere kind of thing. I wanted to create a magical device which has energy around it, humming energy around it. In my mind, that made sense, but when I used the word humming, it instead created hummingbirds. So then I realized I need to make it more abstract and not use words like humming. I can use words like energy and colors and sparks around it, and I got a bunch of like nice visualizations. I used some of these at different points in the story. I wanted to introduce the male protagonist, but I was really worried at this point of showing him from the front because the image may not be, the face may not be consistent across parts of the story. So I created a image from the back, and because it was raining outside, his coat and his hair are wet from the rain. I was able to get somewhat of an image that I wanted. I used the vary region tool to vary the same ice cream parlor which had like children sitting and eating, to now show empty chairs, dim lights, and some leftovers, because the goal was there's a crime that has happened in the ice cream parlor, and so everybody has rushed out and things are just left in a mess. One of the clues for this crime was that on the floor, when you look at it under a special magical device, you see blue footprints leading out into some direction. So I wanted to try a bunch of these to see if I can make that happen. It was either giving me shoes, or the entire floor itself was becoming a shoe, or it was showing the boots, so it didn't work out. I also kept coming back to ice cream because I really wanted the ice cream to look really, really nice. If I may, sometimes it looked like a goblet of fire instead of an ice cream. And it often looked like a museum piece, something kept on the side to admire, not in the middle of a restaurant. And often too much of it dripping outside. I mean, if it's luxurious, the whitish discharge on the table does not make it look luxurious. So that was a mix or a balance that I could not achieve. Eventually, I was able to get some blue speck of paint on the floor by emphasizing more on the yellow cobblestone floor and less on the blue speck of paint. I came back to the puppet method, or using my wife's image of her eating ice cream with a puffer jacket on, and removed the background, gave it to Midjourney to create some images like that. These images look of a reasonable Indian young girl or woman eating ice cream, but the images are too modern because the input was too modern. So it seemed hard to be able to take it from here to something medieval or ancient. So I thought I'll start fresh for a character development. You can see more of my attempts for creating a magical wizarding alley in different lighting. Here, using an image from the Fandom wiki worked well. in creating something consistent, and eventually after many iterations I reached something which was not the same as in the input, but had some followed a similar theme, so that worked well. What was challenging was changing the lighting, so it's from morning to dusk to adding rain or to adding puddles of water on the floor. That was really challenging. Sometimes the puddles were way too big. Instead of puddles, it was like the entire floor was flooded with water. Or instead of droplets of the rain, you'll find that there were circular, like geometrically arranged water droplets on the floor, which doesn't make sense. I tried to create more lighting into this, so like daytime or sunlight or bright. Sometimes it would change the entire look and feel way too far away. So then I can't use that in the same story for the same location but at a different time of the day. Scrolling up, I wanted to create a different area of the wizarding world, which is a sinister, scary, dark area. But not in the night. I wanted it in the evening or in the like late afternoon. And because it was dark, sinister, scary, Midjourney created it in the night. And it was a struggle to add more lighting into it. I tried to add moonlight into it. It added a huge light, a huge moon. It looked more like a sun than a moon. Or so there was again like some of these worked, but you can see that there were a lot of trials to reach some image that worked fine. Next, coming back to the puppet method, where I tried to create a young Indian man, rugged look, tousled long hair, rimless round glasses. Rimless round glasses didn't really exist probably for a really long time. So it created round glasses but not rimless. And you can see that although I asked for a young Indian man and rugged look, it also created two feminine or female images. I wanted the entire body, so I tried to zoom out using Midjourney. And it kept adding very pointless background behind the person, but it was at least like slowly expanding the person. But I started afresh because this was a bit too rugged, a bit too older than the look I was hoping for, and modifying it was not working for me. So through some more of these looks, I eventually went with this look for the male protagonist and this look for the female protagonist, and kept modifying that for different situations. For example, here I try to give the male a wand in his hand, which is a magic. It looks like a stick, decorative stick, but instead he was getting something which looked more like an extinguished candle or an incense stick. I wanted to show the same character with a glimmer in his eyes, a shine in his eyes, because he has deciphered some clues and he knows the secret for the solving the mystery. But instead a ball of light appeared in front of him. And so one of the challenges I saw was changing expressions on people. That was really hard. And something that worked well for me later was putting more emphasis on that emotion, less on the existing puppet. I also tried to put both the male and the female image to get an image of them walking together in the night. One of the image came out as them together, but the women suddenly got a bit too modern, and rest of the images were them, like the guy and the girl merged on top of each other instead of two people walking together. So here you can see that the emotions somewhat changed on the female protagonist. They're excited or jumping or happy. So some of those images came up here. I'm again back to more ice cream and somewhat more magical. I used one of these images because you can see there's some kind of blue dome on top of the ice cream. So there's something different there versus just an ice cream sundae. There's just a lot in this image, so that also appealed to me. Here I'm again trying flying ice creams. You can see the plates are flying. And I guess that's what I asked for here. Here ice cream sundae is in the air, but the background was not medieval enough. And so here again, like I tried ice cream sundae in the air, but more medieval style. But it's again a showpiece, and now it's not floating as much. Here I was able to make the female protagonist slightly angry and concentrating and fighting mode, but still the expression is a bit too neutral, as you can see. I now have some magical parchment or papers here with an ice cream recipe written on it. I realized that the word recipe was a bit too put off for Midjourney. It was taking it in a different angle. It started showing a lot of fruits and vegetables along with the recipe paper, which was not the intent. The intent was just to make it look like a magical paper. So that was my fault. And like changing it helped a bit. Here you can see that concentrating, energetic, and like trying to show her doing some kind of battle helped. And you can see that in the behind also there's some kind of fire and people falling down. So it sort of showed that illustration of some battle happening. I wanted to create ice monsters, but small so that I can fit it inside a pub. But that didn't work either. There were people who looked like monsters. I didn't want people looking like monsters. I wanted monsters, humanoid monsters or whatever. Like these would have been nice, but these were too small and these were too cute. I wanted angry and scary monsters, but smaller size. I wasn't able to do that, so I eventually went with these big looking monsters and didn't show them in the context of the pub. I just showed them as is. When I tried to create ice bullets or ice projectiles coming out from the antagonist, it either showed just a collection of ice pieces or ice stalagmites, stalactites here, so not really ice projectiles. I was able to successfully though get ice falcons statues. So that worked well. It looked scary. It looked like something created from ice. The next, a shop showing this shrunken human heads came out fine. I wanted a subtle motif of a heart and Guinness on the wall, but it was too strong, so I just put it individual image. That was one of the solutions I found, is when you have an image you want to show, it's not subtle, it's too strong. Then instead of showing everything else, just show that small imagery or illustration you want to show. Here I wanted to show people sitting in an old, dark, medieval, magical pub inside eating fish and chips. But either there was too much focus on the people and it was a very bright place, and then the food was not visible, or there was too much focus on the food but it was outdoors, it was not really indoors. So I had to find a balance between these images, find something that worked. I think eventually I chose one of these images which was outdoors, and then I cropped it so that only the inside part was visible or something. Then I wanted to show a goblin run bank, magical bank, and then also one of them sneering or angrily talking to the protagonist from a position high up to them. I was able to get something here. I wanted to show a lady reading a book, but the book is upside down, and she's standing in a line or queue. That didn't came out, but it came like some ladies reading something, but in a library or a shop or a museum. So how I worked with this was I zoomed and cropped it a bit more to just focus on the lady and the book, and then the rest of the text would help the reader imagine that, oh, the book you see in the image is actually upside down. I wanted to create an eccentric magical house. So I created a bunch of these. I wanted to show it near to water, but here it's surrounded by water. So that doesn't look like a house on the coast near the beach, but that looks like a house inside or in a island house. So I cropped it to use it in my story. Then I wanted to show books flying from a shelf, like one book flying from the shelf to one of the characters, and instead all the books were flying, or the entire bookshelf was flying, or there were birds along with books. So I left that desire and like went with some other images. I wanted to show that there's a character reading a book, but like the character is holding a book, like you see here. And some of these worked, some of these didn't work. I instead chose sometimes to just show the one lady and one book on different images. I wanted to show a school corridor. Okay, maybe like skipping the school corridor, I'll show here is I wanted to show an ancient parchment which is slightly wet and it's lying on a forest floor, a cobblestone footpath, let's say. And at this point I realized I was running out of Midjourney credits for the month. So I used stop 50 or stop 60 to stop jobs before they complete so that I can see what's going to come up. And then only because more often than not, it was not that Midjourney did a bad job or I had to try the same prompt again and again, but the words I chose were not correct based on Midjourney's understanding of those words. Two things help. One is, anytime I think I want to show an ancient parchment on a cobblestone floor, I can do a search of that in Google Images and see what it shows. Those were probably the input from Midjourney as well, right? So that helps me understand. Second is stop 50 and see what shows up consistently. Keep changing the words. So you can see some images here, some here, some here, some here. And then eventually this one sort of worked. So I created this, and I can reuse an earlier image like this one by getting its seed and using the same seed and the same text or similar text prompt to get very, very similar images again in the same session of Midjourney. After a point, the characters go to a tall tower surrounded by water and trees. And so I was able to try a few images, again using the stop word to get something and then go ahead with it. I wanted to create a magical ice cream medieval churner. So ice cream churner is an ice cream machine. But because the word churner is also a verb or like somebody doing an action, so it started putting people doing that action. So I then started saying maker machine, and that came out better. I wanted to show a ice cream scoop. You can think of the scoops that people use in restaurants to give you ice cream, but with a motif on it of a wraith monster. And instead, the entire ice cream scoop had some of the like evil feeling to it, including like this part of it, and even the ice cream piece inside it. Now I'm back to the protagonist trying to eat ice cream, and this was a different time in the story. I'm not sequential here. But it was really hard to change the puppet photo from earlier to make her hold an ice cream. This one, the photo came out well, although it painted pink a lot, but there were 6 fingers. She had 6 fingers. Because you can see 5 here, and then there's the opposing thumb on the other side. Or her clothes became pink, or the clothes became modern, or now she has a coffee in her hand. Or the hand is facing the other way like this. Instead of her own hand, it's somebody else's hand. Or she has a pink flower. So these were somewhat challenging. I also wanted to change the male protagonist from the puppet to make him his hair wet and jacket wet. But there was some circular imagery behind him at the start. That circular imagery took too much of a focus by Midjourney tried to make it a moon or a light or a window. Just never gave up on it. So I realized that I had to remove the background. So after removing the background, that worked out a bit better. And one thing that worked well was I removed the background from the female protagonist, the male protagonist, and created a collage of them side by side. Then I gave it back to Midjourney as the input image and asked it to create a couple walking in the dark. So then it came out well. Because I wanted this to be a portrait long form image to be on the cover of the book, so I kept expanding it more and more in that dimensions. So here are somewhat the cover photos of the book. The female protagonist somewhat became modern in this, and the guy also became modern because you can see he has a jeans on, but it was close enough with the background lighting that it worked fine. It was dim background lighting, so it worked fine. Here I wanted to show a fireplace with green wisps coming out of it, green flame. So I think I used a fandom image and modified that, and that worked well. Instead, if I were to start from scratch, when I use the word green, it instead thinks there are plants around the fireplace, so it has added a lot of plants there. And it, no matter what, it doesn't make the fire from yellow to green. It kept the fire as yellow. So instead, starting from fresh helped me make it a lot more greener. Whenever I try to show emotions, it would always make a person's face feeling those emotions. And so the only way I could get emotions without a person's face was if I told it there's like using a multi-image prompt that no people, no faces. Here I have some magical symbols drawn on the floor, but instead of the floor, it drew it on the wall, so I went ahead with it. Here I have images of the antagonist. First I did stop 50 to try a bunch of versions of it. Then I wanted to show an auction house with a bunch of magical items kept on a table on a stage available for auction, but instead it showed it as a shop. So I went ahead with a shop with more emphasis on just the table with the items kept on it, instead of showing the entire shop. That worked better. And you can see that there are images of the antagonist. I wanted her hair to be mostly normal, but with a speck of, I think, white in her hair. And it's very purplish. I went ahead with it. I wanted to show the same Again, you can see that the emotion is very neutral, flat-lined. I wanted to show an angry version of it. This one, we with Stop 50 came out great. And I wanted to recreate this. Even by using the seed, I was not able to recreate it. Later, it was never the same. You can see that some of the images became a bit too modern. I wanted to show a gust of wind coming and blowing off all the lights. It was a bit too, I guess, this is not in the same setting as the earlier one. Let me put it that way. Now I want to show the male protagonist doing martial arts. And yeah, it's showing up as doing martial arts, but the emotions are not coming up on the face. I wanted to show the ice golems melting. This worked great. I used the same image as before and told it to make this melting ice. And that worked fine. So this was nice. Then I was able to slightly change the face of the antagonist by making her sad. You'll not see crying, you'll not see a lot of sadness, but there's a hint of sadness, and that worked well with the story. I got a great ecstatic, happy old young man, man, wizard, eccentric. But later on I realized I didn't want happy, I wanted concerned. So I got some images here which worked fine. And you can see I'm back to trying to make the female protagonist hold an ice cream spoon in her hand with some ice cream on it. There were a lot of variations. Eventually the one I went with had her holding ice cream with her fingers, like this one, the white ice cream. So I originally wanted pink ice cream, I originally wanted with a spoon, but I had to settle for something else that was getting generated here. That's everything about all the images that I tried generating using Midjourney. So there were thousands of images that I tried, out of which I chose 60 images to put in my storybook as a gift to my wife and make it illustrated, make the text come to life, breathing life into the images. Let me know if this helps you uncover some new tips in using Midjourney, and if you have tried any such personalized projects, how have those gone?